Episode 4, What the Cold Could Not Touch. On a warm November morning in Manhattan, the familiar strains of the doxology drifted through my open window. A nearby congregation's voices swelled and receded like waves, and I paused, hairbrush mid-stroke through my greying hair as the melody transported me to another sanctuary, another time. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. How many Sunday mornings had I awakened to those exact words from St. Peter's Church in Auburn? There, the hymn served a different purpose. More than praise, it woke a sleeping child whose foot warmer had gone cold during service. I set down my brush and reached for the packet of letters on my writing desk. Letters from William Henry Seward that I would take to Auburn tomorrow. The apartment was quiet, as it had been for 10 years since Samuel's death, and these letters were my conversation now. Voices from Auburn reaching across time and distance, reminding me how our childhoods shape us in ways we only realize decades later.
Do your clothes speak of yesterday? Do they hide the man you could be? New goods daily, new original styles, the finest quality, guaranteed. Stop merely wearing clothes. Start wearing success. Come and see for yourself.
Cold sanctuary. St. Peter's was a building that tested faith as much as nurtured it. Our sanctuary, impressive for our small community, had only 2 stoves to ward off the brutal Auburn winters. Beautiful as it was, tall stained glass windows casting colourful light on polished pews, it offered little warmth on bitter days. We wore gloves to hold leather prayer books. As we sang, breath plumed from our mouths like small, fleeting clouds. I remember one January morning when it was so cold that ice formed on the inside of those beautiful windows. My sister Hannah's voice rose clear and strong during the processional hymn, her breath visible with each note. William Bostwick Jr.'s powerful bass anchored us all, pulling the congregation into harmony when fingers grew too numb to hold hymnals steady. Dr. Hakaliah Burt's sermons on those cold mornings were typically brief but powerful, because he believed faith could be shown in fewer words when needed. We attended, we sang, we listened, then we went home to warm fires, having expressed devotion to God. When my foot warmer's coals burned out, my aunt would draw me near, wrapping me in her fur muff. I would drift into peaceful slumber against her shoulder, the cold air sharp in my lungs, the familiar voices washing over me like a lullaby. Always the doxology would wake me, that final triumphant hymn signalling the end of our trial by cold.
For the finest carriage and the fastest horse, nothing less than perfection will suffice. Manufactured for reliability, built for success. Gillett supplies the gear that guarantees performance.
Letters from Washington. I first wrote to Secretary Seward in April 1865, days after the assassination attempt that nearly took his life. My letter was brief, almost apologetic, one Auburn native to another, sharing concern and a few memories of evening concerts on Fort Hill. I did not expect a reply from the Secretary of State, recovering from grievous wounds, mourning the president, but his letter arrived 3 weeks later, the script shaky from pain. He wrote of how my mention of those Fort Hill concerts had given him something better than recent horrors to occupy his thoughts. He asked if young Bostwick still played, recalling the evening he bungled a Mozart piece so thoroughly that even the dogs began howling.
Strange that I should think of that now, when laughter seems so far away.
He wrote,
Yet somehow the memory helps.
Over the years, Our correspondence continued sporadically. He wrote of diplomatic dinners and treaty negotiations, but inevitably circled back to Auburn, the teachers who had shaped us both, the families who had known us as children, the small lessons that had prepared us for larger trials. His final letter came in October 1872, just weeks before his death.
I am dying in Auburn, Mrs. Hunt, and I am grateful for it. I have seen the world and helped shape the nation, but I wanted to end where I began. Yesterday, my nurse helped me to the window. I could see Fort Hill from my bed. No flutes play there now, but I heard them anyway. Bostwick's clear notes cutting through the summer evening. Hardenberg's harmony. You asked in your last letter what I would tell my younger self if I could. I would tell him to cherish the cold mornings and summer concerts, because those small moments prepared him for bigger tests. When pain makes sleep impossible, I do not think of Alaska or the Union. I think of St. Peter's on a January morning, and how we all endured the cold together. That lesson, that you persevere as a community in tough times, has carried me through life. Character, I believe, is formed through 10,000 small moments, and these moments are the foundation for the great events recorded in history. Our Auburn provided that for me, and I trust your paper will convey this message.
Whatever your trade, whatever your pleasure, Coventry has your tobacco. From our superior domestic brands to the finest imported leaf, we manufacture and supply all kinds.
Does your day stop when the road turns rough? Trust the Auburn. Best supported axle, fully warranted. From Clapp Wagon Co.
Voices from Auburn. But Seward's letters were not the only correspondence I carried. Yesterday, a package arrived from Auburn, letters from the Miller sisters, responding to my inquiry about their own memories. Miss Fanny wrote that Auburn taught her that work and graceful living are not enemies. She never felt that her mill work diminished her standing in society.
Auburn accepted that a woman might keep ledgers and still host an elegant tea,
she explained.
I learned that authenticity and refinement could coexist, Auburn's particular gift to its daughters.
Sarah added a postscript reminding me of my Hannibal paper in Professor Strong's class.
How the boys sat up straighter when you finished, suddenly aware that a woman's mind was every bit as sharp as their own. We were all teaching each other, weren't we? Building each other's courage, one small moment at a time.
Different voices, different paths, but all testifying to the same truth, that Auburn's ordinary moments prepared us for our various futures.
Don't let cracked paint ruin your pride or rot your timber. The mud takes its toll.
But George Wills restores it. Carriage and Sleigh painting, with good work guaranteed. Best appointed shop in Central New York.
After a long day, a gentleman deserves his time. For the finest relaxation, choose the leaf and pipe from George Battams.
The journey home. The train carried me north through landscapes I had watched from my porch as a child. I had been part of that eastward movement once, travelling to New York for love, staying to build a life, remaining even after loss claimed my beloved husband. I opened Seward's final letter again, his shaky handwriting blurring as tears filled my eyes.
Be present, even when comfort fails.
Samuel was there for me through 15 years, never once suggesting my stories were foolish. After he died, I reflected on it and started to rebuild what mockery had broken, using Auburn as my foundation. That was the lesson, wasn't it? Not that Auburn was extraordinary, but that it taught frontier people to be graceful, finding nobility through hardship and supporting each other, even in our cold church. The train arrived at Auburn's State Street depot at 2:30. The village had grown. Electric lights now lit up the streets, and new buildings lined Genesee Street, while beautiful homes dotted South Street. But Fort Hill still loomed in the distance, unchanged and unmoving. I checked into the American Hotel on Genesee Street, and after dinner, spent the evening reviewing my paper one final time. Tomorrow, I would stand before the Historical Society and share these stories, not as dry history, but as my living memory.
A city is judged by its strength, a home by its foundation. Albert Garrett supplies the stone and lime that lasts generations. Orders filled promptly.
Quality leather demands quality tools. We make both. From the tool that cuts the hide to the finished hardware that holds it fast, Gillett is the manufacturer you trust for lasting value.
Before the society. The next morning, I crossed Genesee Street and went to the Historical Society offices in the Seward Bank building. I climbed the stairs to the Bostwick Room, named after the father of William Bostwick Jr. My travelling case was heavy with letters and papers. The January cold was bitter, exactly like the mornings I would describe. Secretary Dunning greeted me warmly, and gradually the room filled with a few familiar faces, grown older, and younger faces I didn't know. In the second row sat my sister Hannah, now frail and grey, but there, supporting me. The 11-year-old who had become a little mother was now 80, the last survivor of the circle of care that had raised me. When our eyes met, she smiled, and I saw the girl she had been, brave, determined, carrying burdens too heavy for her small shoulders. At precisely 2 o'clock, Secretary Dunning called the meeting to order.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great privilege to introduce Mrs. S.B. Hunt, née Azuba Terry, one of Auburn's native daughters. Mrs. Hunt has prepared a paper about her memories during the early years of our village. Mrs. Hunt.
I rose, my papers trembling slightly, not from age, but from the weight of what I carried. Thank you, Mr. Dunning. Members of the Society, friends, I come before you this day not as a historian, but rather as a witness. I watched Auburn from my porch for 70 years, first as a child on Genesee Street, and later from a window in Manhattan. But Auburn has never left me, and today I bring you something more valuable than dates and census figures. I lifted Seward's letters. These letters from Secretary Seward, written in his later years, reflect on what Auburn provided him, not through his grand experiences, but through the small ones he learned here. Those too became part of his foundation. Cold Sunday mornings at St. Peter's fostered his devotion, while concerts on Fort Hill performed by our young men showed how music could add something magical to people's lives. I paused, looking at the faces before me. But I also bring letters from the Miller sisters, who learned different lessons in Auburn, that work and graceful living could coexist, that authenticity and refinement were not enemies. Different paths, different lessons, yet all rooted in our soil. I set the letters down and picked up my paper. My maiden name was Azuba Terry. I was born here in 1810, and I've been observing life ever since. One thing I've learned is that a person's history isn't just written in cities or on battlefields. It's created every day in small communities like ours, by ordinary people like us who saw beyond today. My voice grew stronger. I glanced at Hannah, whose eyes were already glistening. When tragedy struck my family in 1811, 3 women formed a circle of care that raised us motherless children. My grandmother, my aunt, and my sister. I looked directly at Hannah now, who was only 11 years old when she took on responsibilities that would normally be years away. Thank you, Hannah. Hannah nodded slightly, remembering. The foot warmers and the doxology, the summer concerts and the frozen sanctuary, these were not merely charming parts of frontier life. They were part of our foundation. Secretary Seward knew it. The Miller sisters knew this. And now, I hope you will as well. I looked around the room one final time. Let me tell you about a girl who sat on our porch and watched various people and their stories go down the Seneca Turnpike, and how what she saw became part of my story. Let me tell you about the music that drifted across our village on summer evenings. Let me tell you about going to church in bitter cold and how that devotion prepared me for the hardships that followed. I smiled, feeling suddenly at peace. Now, let me tell you about our Auburn. Not as it appears in official records, but as we lived it in her early days, as we loved it. It shaped us, one small moment at a time. Then, finally, in front of my hometown, I began presenting my paper. How grateful I felt that Hannah was there for me again, supporting me as I shared my memories. I wanted to make her proud. I paused briefly as a wave of realization hit me, making me feel faint. The girl who once watched from the porch, dreaming of being a writer, was now a published author, sharing her work with her Auburn friends and family. All these emotions surged through me in an instant, and my sister gave me a gentle wink to help me regain focus before I moved on. My maiden name was Azuba Terry. I was born at Auburn in 1810.
Quality you can feel. Crafted, not just sold. Manufactured here in Auburn. The finest in the state. From farm to freight, coal to lumber, E.D. Clapp builds the wagons that build Auburn. The Auburn. Best painted, best varnished, the finest quality work at the busiest corner in town.
A true bargain is not cheap. It is built to last. We are manufacturing clothiers. Our quality and prices are guaranteed, selected from the best production of the world.